With the federal election just around the corner and provincial polls showing no one party dominating, British Columbia could actually play a significant role in who wins this election, especially with two federal leaders representing BC ridings. Historically, BC has never really played that big of a part in a federal election, and outcomes have often been determined before votes in Western Canada are even counted. In 2015, for example, the election was called before they hit Manitoba. Traditionally, BC's political map at the federal level has been straightforward. The Liberals would win the west side of Vancouver and the NDP the east. Conservatives would then win in affluent suburbs and rural areas, and the NDP would get the rest. But in the 2015 election, in the height of Trudeau mania, the Liberals won 17 of BC's 42 seats, a lot of which were formerly strong Conservative ridings. This meant the Conservatives fell from 21 seats in 2011 to just 10 seats in 2015. The NDP held on to 14 ridings and the Greens had 1. But this year, things might work out quite differently. With 17 seats in the last election, we know the Liberals traditionally have a stronghold in Vancouver, but we don't know if voters will stay Liberal after the Trans Mountain pipeline purchase, the blackface scandal, and the SNC-Lavalin affair, especially given that Jody Wilson-Raybould is now battling for a seat in the province as an independent after she was kicked out of the party. Bad news for Trudeau, but good news for Andrew Scheer, who seems convinced he can ride those scandals all the way to a Conservative majority. Scheer has voted against marriage equality, against abortion, and against trans rights. But this election, he promises that he won't be reopening any of those debates. And with Conservatives coming out on top in recent polls, maybe that's enough for BC voters. Let's move on to greener pastures, shall we? The Greens. The Greens are becoming increasingly popular on Vancouver Island. They even picked up their second federal seat ever in the province last May. Every time political insiders talk about the Green breakthrough, the riding that gets mentioned is Victoria, which is expected to be a close battle between the NDP and the Greens. So it's one to watch this election. And finally, the NDP. The NDP typically have more support than the Liberals in BC, and singers performed well on the campaign trail. Although the Liberals made gains in the province in 2015 at the expense of the NDP, polls show a less than 5% difference between the two parties in BC this time around. So what does it all mean? Well, it means it's quite difficult to tell who has the upper hand in BC right now. Yes, the Liberals won 17 seats in the last election, but in 2011 the Liberals only won 2 seats, and a lot of the province is now up for grabs as the Trudeau mania of 2015 seems well and truly over. This means nearly every riding in Metro Vancouver could be a game changer, with tight 4-way races across the city and throughout the province. So we can't quite guess how the people in BC will be voting, but can we guess what they'll be voting for? Well, yes. Ish. Whilst policies on housing, education, healthcare, cost of living, the opioid crisis, Indigenous rights and crime are of course important for voters in BC, one of the biggest issues for voters across the province is based around climate action. The global climate strikes in September and the ongoing protests against the Trans Mountain pipeline shows how important climate action is in this federal election. A CTV Nanos poll suggested that the environment is the issue that will most influence how people vote in this election. It's not surprising then that in BC, with its rich, diverse and celebrated landscape, that the Trans Mountain pipeline remains a key issue for BC voters. So what does the Trans Mountain pipeline actually mean for us in BC? Well, the whole Trans Mountain expansion project will increase the full capacity of the system from 300,000 barrels a day to 890,000. This would mean a 7-fold increase in the number of oil tankers coming and going, and more traffic means more risk of oil tankers crashing and oil spills. The risk of a marine oil spill in the 50-year life of the Trans Mountain expansion project is between 16 and 67%, according to a report by the City of Vancouver. Like many others, people in British Columbia are struggling with balancing their concerns about the economy and the environment, meaning they remain very divided on the issue. Trudeau has promised all of the profits from his pipeline plans will be invested in the fight against climate change. The NDP and the Greens are actively against the pipeline, whereas the Conservatives support the expansion. The final call will be made by whoever forms government October 21st. This election, for the first time in a very long time, young people, that's Generation Z and Millennials, make up the largest voting demographic. For some of you, this might be your first time voting. Just know that that doesn't normally happen. This means we can actively impact the way the vote goes. Aggregated polls show BC to be more evenly divided between the 4 parties than any other province. There's a spread of less than 17% between the Conservatives who are leading and the Greens coming in 4th. There are ridings in BC that are waging 3-way or 4-way races, which means your vote absolutely counts. So historically, BC may not have affected the outcomes of federal elections, but this year, with the polls as close as they are, the election results may depend on how we vote on the West Coast. Come election night, the whole country might be watching us as the results come in. So no matter who you vote for, just make sure you go out there and vote.